Today I'll be talking about dividing variables. So, how to simplify a division of variables, basically. So, if we had an x divided by an x, right? Right, this is the same on top, same on bottom, so this should be 1, right? This would just be 1, right? If we had x squared over x, what is this? So let me just write the basic formula for that. So if we had b divided by b, we'll make the top one m and we'll make this. So b to the power of m divided by b to the power of n. It's the same as b m minus n. So when we're dividing, in my previous video on multiplication, I added them, but because we're dividing, we're going to do the opposite of, basically the opposite of what we do with multiplication, which was adding. But this time we're dividing because we're dividing. We're going to subtract because we're dividing. So you divide the top exponent by the bottom exponent when they have the same base. So this would be is equals to 2 minus 1, right? We can turn it to 1 right there because x to the power of 1 is just x, which leaves us with just x. And that's our answer for this top one. Another way you can look at it is by using this sort of thinking over here. We can take x, right? We can split x squared into two x's, right? So this is just x squared, right? So I'm going to split that up in the top part of the function. Not the function, of the fraction here. Right? And what we can do is we can split this fraction apart. So we can pair these two together and make them their own little fraction on the side here. And we can do x over 1, right? So if we were to multiply this and this, we would get this whole thing, right? I just split the fraction apart. And now we know that this is just 1. So we would have 1 times x, right? Which is just x. And that's the same answer we got up here. So you could look at it this way, right? You could just split them all, right? If we had x cubed, we would have 3 x's here, but we're doing x squared. So we just write out 2 x's, and then you can just kind of like cross these out, and you're just left with this guy on top. So you just write x. That's your answer, right? This works for smaller numbers like this, but like you want to remember this, how to do it this way, because when you get to like 50 minus something something, right, then it's gonna be kind of hard to write all the variables out. Here's an example of the top exponent being smaller than the bottom exponent, right? So you would do this one the same way. You would have x 3 minus 5, right? And then we would get x is equal to negative 2. Now we typically don't want a negative number as our exponent, so you can rewrite it as this. And when we flip them, because we can always pretend there's a 1, right? We can always write it as a fraction as this. It's the same thing. And all we're doing is when we have a negative exponent on top, we flip it like this, and it becomes this, right? We put the 1 on top and this on bottom. And when we switch them, the exponent becomes positive, and you leave it like that. And again, if you want to write out all the x's, because the numbers aren't that big right now, right, you can pair these two together and pair these two together and pair this one together, and you're left with 2 on the bottom. So these all cross out, and you're just left with x squared on the bottom, right? Same answer, different way of doing it. But again, you always want to remember this method because it's a lot faster. And just like multiplication, we can only do this if they have the same base. If they're different bases, you kind of just leave it like that. So if I had x divided by y, there's nothing I can do. Just leave it like that, because you don't know the values of either of them, so you can't do anything. But when they have the same base, you can simplify it, give you the same answer as you would. Like you can put in the same number here, and you get the same answer, basically. This is just, it takes less work to do this than it would take to do this, right? Because if I had, let's say I did, let's say x is equal to 2. All right, I'm just going to do this with this way. So I'm going to do 2 to the power of 3 divided by 2 to the power of 5. This is equal to 8. And this is equal to, let's see, 1632. Right? And if I were to simplify, right, just divide both top and bottom by 8, I would get 1 over 4, right? But because I simplified it up here, I could, if I plug in just 2 down here, so I did 2 squared, right? It's the same as 1 over 4, right? I just got the answer way faster than doing all this. So that's why it's useful to be able to simplify something like this. It just makes it easier to work with. And yeah, that's how you divide variables that have the same base.